The Coven didn't check the calendar. That was their first mistake. They saw a frightened girl in a torn dress, smelling of terror and rain. They saw a runt, a nobody, a human disposable enough to be thrown into the pit to appease the monster that lived beneath the city. They were so focused on their own cruelty, on the political maneuvering of who would survive the night, that they forgot to look at the sky. They forgot that tonight wasn't just a full moon, it was a blood moon. And according to the dusty book I'd stolen from Rodrigo's private library 3 months ago, the laws of the tribute changed tonight. On any other night, I was meat. I was a snack to keep the king sated so he wouldn't hunt them. But tonight, the marriage of bone law was active. Tonight, the tribute wasn't a victim, she was a petitioner. I stood at the edge of the abyss, my toes curling over the cold stone. Rodrigo was behind me, his hand heavy on my shoulder, his sharp nails digging into my skin. He thought I was shaking from fear. I was shaking from adrenaline. "Go to him, little waste," Rodrigo whispered, his voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Feed our king so we may live." He shoved me. I didn't scream as I fell into the dark. I didn't beg. I just clenched my jaw and prepared to do the one thing no human had ever done in the history of the tribute. I was going to give the Vampire King an order. I hit the ground hard. Stone, cold, damp, and smelling of something metallic that I knew instinctively was centuries of dried blood. My ankle twisted, sending a white-hot spike of pain up my leg, but I bit the inside of my cheek to keep silent. Silence was the first rule of survival in the Coven. Above me, the circle of light, the opening of the pit, was a distant, mocking eye. I could hear them up there, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. The Coven was celebrating. They thought they were safe for another decade. They thought they'd bought their peace with the life of Allyssa, the orphan, the cleaner, the girl who scrubbed the blood off their floors after their feasts. I stood up, testing my weight on my bad ankle. It held. Barely. "Hello," I whispered. The darkness didn't answer. It breathed. The air down here was different. It was heavy, pressurized, like being at the bottom of the ocean. It tasted of ozone and iron and something sweet like rotting flowers. "I know you're there," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I know who you are." A laugh. It didn't come from a direction. It came from everywhere, vibrating in my teeth, humming in my bones. It was a sound that hadn't been made by a human throat in a very long time. "Do you?" the voice asked. It was deep, velvet-trapped gravel. "You are the tribute. You are the meal. Do meals usually speak to the diner before they are consumed?" 2 lights appeared in the dark. Not lights. Eyes, glowing with a faint, predatory luminescence. Red, deep, burning crimson, like embers dying in a fire. They were 7 feet off the ground. He was massive. Panic flared in my chest, primal and overwhelming. My lizard brain screamed, "Run, prey, run." But my human brain, the brain that had memorized the Codex Sanguinis cover to cover, held firm. "I am Allyssa," I said, "and I am not your meal. You are in my pit," the voice said, closer now. I could hear the rustle of heavy fabric. A coat, a cape. "You were thrown here by Rodrigo. That makes you mine, to keep, to bleed, to break." He stepped into the shaft of moonlight that fell from the opening above. Vincenzo, the king of the undead, the first vampire, the monster parents threatened their children with. He was terrifyingly beautiful. That was the unfairness of it. He should have been a rotting corpse. Instead, he was marble-pale skin stretched over high cheekbones, jet-black hair falling into eyes that burned with ancient boredom. He wore a suit that looked Victorian but fitted with modern precision, torn at the cuffs, stained with something dark. He looked at me the way I looked at a sandwich. "You smell of fear," he said, taking another step. The temperature in the pit dropped 10 degrees. "It's delicious. Spice on the meat." "Check the date," I said. He paused. His head tilted to the side, a bird-like inhuman movement. "What?" "Check the sky," I said, pointing up at the opening where the moon hung, heavy and swollen and unmistakably rusted red. "Tell me what you see, Vincenzo." His eyes narrowed. He looked up. For a second, nothing happened. Then I saw his pupils dilate. I saw the arrogance drain out of his posture, replaced by a sudden, rigid tension. He looked back at me, and for the first time he didn't look hungry. He looked shocked. "The blood moon," he whispered. The words sounded like a curse. "The marriage of bone," I corrected him, my voice gaining strength. Section 4, paragraph 2 of the Sanguine Compact. "On the night of the Bleeding Star, the tribute offered is not a sacrifice, but a petitioner." I took a step toward him. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every instinct screamed that I was walking into a woodchipper. I am not your meal, Vincenzo, I said. I am your claimant. If you love stories where the prey turns the tables on the predator, make sure you subscribe to join our coven. We tell the dark tales that others are too afraid to whisper. Now, watch what happens when a human traps a monster. 3 hours earlier. Stand still, Rodrigo snapped, jerking my hair to pull my head back. I hissed in pain but didn't move. I was standing in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by the 12 members of the Coven High Council. They were all dressed in their finery, velvet, silk, jewels that glittered under the chandeliers. They looked like royalty. They smelled like rot covered in expensive perfume. Rodrigo, the Coven leader, was inspecting me like I was livestock at an auction. He pinched my arm, frowning at the lack of meat. She's thin, Dorian said from the sidelines, swirling a glass of what I pretended was wine. The king prefers them substantial. The king takes what he is given, Rodrigo spat, releasing me. We don't have anyone else. The harvest was poor this month. Too many hunters sniffing around the city. We can't risk snatching a tourist, so we send the cleaner. Dorian laughed. He'll be insulted. He might come up here and complain. If he comes up here, Rodrigo said, turning his cold, dead eyes on me, it will be because he is still hungry, which means Allyssa here didn't do her job. He smiled. It was a facial expression he hadn't practiced enough. It looked like a crack in a porcelain mask. You understand your purpose, don't you, my dear? I looked at the floor. Yes, Master Rodrigo, to serve, he said, to sustain, to ensure the survival of your betters, my betters. I wanted to laugh. I'd spent 5 years in this house. I knew them. I knew that Dorian was afraid of the dark. I knew that Christie cried in her sleep about the children she'd eaten. I knew that Rodrigo was so terrified of the king beneath the city that he pissed himself every time the floorboards creaked too loudly. They weren't my betters. They were parasites. Weak, scared parasites who bullied humans to feel strong because they knew deep down they were just pets to the real monster in the basement. I understand, I said. Good. Rodrigo gestured to 2 guards. Take her to the prep room. Wash her. Send her. Don't bother feeding her. It's a waste of resources. The guards grabbed my arms. I didn't fight. Fighting was for people who had muscles and weapons. I had neither. I had a brain and I had a secret. As they dragged me out of the hall, I caught Dorian's eye. He winked at me, a cruel, mocking gesture. Enjoy the pit, Allyssa, his eyes said. Enjoy your last night of peace, Dorian, I thought back. Because they hadn't checked the calendar. I had. I'd been counting the days for 3 years, ever since I found the codex while dusting the library, ever since I translated the section on the Blood Moon tribute. It only happened once every 50 years, a rare alignment of lunar cycle and stellar positioning that the ancient vampires, the ones who wrote the laws, considered sacred, the marriage of bone. It was a safety valve, a way for the universe to balance the scales. On that one night, the prey had power. On that one night, the king was bound. I let the guards drag me down the corridor. I let them shove me into the prep room. I let them scrub my skin raw with cold water and dress me in a flimsy white shift that offered no protection against the cold. I was terrified. Of course I was. I was 22 years old, human, and about to be thrown into a hole with a creature that ate people like popcorn. But terror is a funny thing. If you push it far enough, past the point of panic, past the point of despair, it turns into something else. It turns into clarity. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror of the prep room, pale face, wide, dark eyes, brown hair hanging in wet strands. I looked like a victim. Good, I whispered to my reflection, let them see a victim, because the best trap is the one that looks like a gift. Present time, the pit. Vincenzo was pacing. It was like watching a tiger in a cage if the tiger was 6'4", wearing a bespoke suit and radiated an aura of lethal annoyance. You want Rodrigo dead, he repeated. He stopped pacing and looked at me. That is your request. Yes, I said. Boring, he drawled. He sounded disappointed. Everyone wants Rodrigo dead. Even Rodrigo wants Rodrigo dead deep down. He is a tedious little man with delusions of adequacy. He took a step closer. The red glow of his eyes intensified. You could ask for freedom, he said softly. I could lift you out of this pit. I could give you a bag of diamonds from the hoard in the corner. You could run away to wherever it is humans run to. Florida. If I run, I said, keeping my voice steady, Rodrigo will send hunters after me. He can't let a tribute survive. It makes him look weak. I'd be dead in a week. True, Vincenzo conceded. So you want me to kill him? Fine. I can go up there right now, tear his head off, paint the walls with him. And then, he smiled. It was terrifying. And then, once the deed is done, the request is fulfilled. The law is satisfied. And you? He poked my chest with one long, cold finger. You are still in my pit, and I am still hungry. He leaned in close. His breath smelled like winter. Did you think this through, little rat? You invoke the law to kill your enemy, but you forget the second part of the equation. Once the boon is granted, the immunity ends. I didn't flinch. I'd read the codex 3 times. I knew the loophole within the loophole. I didn't finish my request, I said. Vincenzo froze. His eyes narrowed. You said you wanted Rodrigo dead. That was the goal, I said, not the method. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment where I either died or bought myself a life. I request that you destroy the Coven of the Red Spire, I said, using the Coven's full, ancient name. I request that you remove them from power and reclaim this city. That is a large request, Vincenzo murmured. But doable. And I continued, my voice gaining an edge of steel, to ensure the task is done correctly, to ensure no stragglers survive to hunt me down. I request that you take me as your consort until the deed is fully complete. Silence. Absolute, tomb-like silence. Vincenzo stared at me. He stared at me for a full 10 seconds, unmoving, unblinking. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that echoed up the shaft. I heard a muffled gasp from above. The Coven heard it. They must be terrified. Their silent monster was laughing. Consort. Vincenzo wheezed, wiping a tear of blood from his eye. You, a human servant, you want to be the consort of the first king. The law says I can request protection, I said. Consort status grants absolute immunity. It grants me your mark. It grants me, I swallowed hard. It grants me the right to stand at your side. It grants you the right to warm my bed, he sneered, the humor vanishing instantly. Is that what you want? To be a pet? A blood bag with a title? I want to live, I said fiercely. And I want them to die. Being your consort is the price, I'll pay it. Vincenzo studied me. He looked at my hands, clenched into fists. He looked at my pulse, hammering in my neck. He looked at the determination in my eyes. You are invoking the marriage of bone, he said softly. Do you know why it is called that? No, I lied, I knew. Because it is not a marriage of love, he said, stepping closer. It is a binding of marrow. It is a contract written in the skeleton, if I accept. You belong to me, not just tonight. Forever, he reached out and traced the line of my jaw. His skin was ice cold, but it burned where he touched me. You become my property, he whispered. My shadow, my responsibility. If you try to run, I will find you. If you try to betray me, I will break you. If you bore me. He let the threat hang in the air. I won't bore you, I whispered. He chuckled darker this time. We shall see. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron. He pulled me toward him so close our bodies were touching. I could feel the cold radiating off him, seeping into my bones. Very well, Allyssa, he said. The Coven offered you as meat. You have offered yourself as a partner. He looked up at the opening of the pit. His expression shifted from amusement to cold, predatory malice. Let us go and tell Rodrigo the good news. The Coven was drunk. They were lounging on the velvet sofas, drinking the last of the imported O-negative, congratulating themselves on another successful tribute. Did you hear the scream? Dorian asked, giggling. I thought I heard a scream. He's probably playing with her, Rodrigo said, waving a hand dismissively. The king likes to hunt before he eats. It improves the flavor. Poor Allyssa, Christie sighed, though she didn't look sad. She looked relieved it wasn't her. She was a good cleaner. Hard to replace. We'll find another stray, Rodrigo said. The city is full of them. Boom. The heavy oak doors of the grand hall didn't just open, they exploded. Splinters of wood rained down on the Coven. Dust billowed into the room. Rodrigo jumped to his feet, spilling his wine. What is the meaning of? The words died in his throat. Through the dust, a figure emerged, tall, dark, radiating an aura of power so heavy it made the air hard to breathe. Vincenzo. The Coven froze. They had never seen the king leave the pit. He was bound there. He was supposed to stay down there. And then they saw me. I walked beside him. I wasn't cowering. I wasn't bleeding. I was holding his arm, my hand resting on the sleeve of his coat like I was being escorted to a ball. Dorian dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. "Allyssa," he whispered. "Good evening, Dorian," I said. My voice was steady. Vincenzo's presence was like a shield, absorbing the fear, projecting nothing but dominance. "My king," Rodrigo stammered, falling to his knees. The others quickly followed suit, scrambling to bow. We did not expect. Is the tribute unsatisfactory? We can find another." The tribute was excellent, Vincenzo said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. The tribute was enlightening. He walked forward, dragging me with him. We stopped in front of Rodrigo. The Coven leader was shaking, his eyes fixed on Vincenzo's boots. "Stand up, Rodrigo," Vincenzo commanded. Rodrigo stood. He was trembling so hard his jewelry rattled. "Why is she still alive?" Rodrigo whispered, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and horror. "Because she is not food," Vincenzo said pleasantly. "She is the law." He lifted my hand, the one resting on his arm, and held it up for the room to see. "Tonight is the blood moon," Vincenzo announced. And Allyssa invoked the marriage of bone. Gasps rippled through the room. They knew the law. They just hadn't thought a human runt would know it. "She has made a request," Vincenzo continued. "She has asked for the dissolution of this coven." Rodrigo's face went grey. "My king, surely, she is lying. She is a human servant. She cannot." "She can," Vincenzo interrupted. "And she did." He smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a flock of very stupid sheep. "She has also requested my protection," he said. "She is now my consort." "Consort," Dorian squeaked her. Vincenzo turned his gaze to Dorian. Dorian stopped breathing. "Yes," Vincenzo said, "her," which means he moved. It was too fast for human eyes to follow. 1 second he was standing beside me. The next he was in front of Dorian. There was a wet crunch. Dorian didn't even scream. He just looked down, surprised at the hand that was now buried in his chest. Vincenzo ripped his hand back. He was holding Dorian's heart. It was still beating sluggishly. Which means Vincenzo finished, dropping the heart onto the floor that anyone who disrespected her has disrespected me. Dorian crumbled to ash, just like that. 500 years of life gone in a second. The Coven screamed, "Run!" Rodrigo shouted, turning to flee. "No," Vincenzo said. He raised his hand. The doors slammed shut. The windows sealed. The shadows in the room elongated, detaching themselves from the walls, forming shapes that had teeth and claws. "Nobody leaves," Vincenzo said. "My consort wants a clean house." He looked back at me. His eyes were glowing so bright they looked like twin suns. "Well, Allyssa," he asked, "shall we begin?" I looked at the screaming vampires. The monsters who had tormented me, mocked me, planned to feed me to a beast. I looked at Vincenzo, the beast himself, waiting for my command. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pity. It was power. "Yes," I said. "Kill them all. Dorian is dust, but Rodrigo is still standing. If you want to see the rest of the Coven burn for what they did to her, hit that like button to fuel Vincenzo's fire. The massacre is just beginning." The Coven was dead. It didn't take long. Vincenzo wasn't a warrior. He was a force of nature. He moved through the room like smoke, like a thought, tearing through vampires who had lived for centuries as if they were made of wet paper. Rodrigo was the last. He crawled across the Persian rug, leaving a trail of black ichor, begging in languages that had been dead since Rome burned. "Please," he wept, clutching at Vincenzo's boots. "I served you. I fed you." "You fed me scraps," Vincenzo said, his voice bored. "And you bored me. That is the greater sin." He looked at me. He was drenched in blood, but none of it was his. It dripped from his chin, stained his white shirt crimson. He looked like a painting of a war god. "Finish him, consort," Vincenzo said. "It was your request." He offered me a sword he'd taken from the wall display. It was heavy, the hilt cold against my palm. I looked down at Rodrigo, the man who had beaten me when I missed a spot cleaning, the man who had laughed when he threw me into the pit. He looked small now, pathetic. I raised the sword. My hands were shaking, but my resolve wasn't. "This is for the cleaners," I whispered. I swung. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't graceful, but it was effective. Rodrigo's head rolled across the floor, his eyes still wide with shock. His body crumbled into dust, leaving only his expensive clothes and a pile of ash on the rug I used to scrub. Silence fell over the room. I dropped the sword. The adrenaline that had sustained me crashed, leaving me hollow and trembling. I swayed on my feet. Vincenzo caught me. His arm went around my waist, holding me up effortlessly. He smelled of copper and ozone. Impressive, he murmured against my ear. Messy, but impressive. He looked around the room at the piles of ash, the shattered furniture, the blood-stained walls. The request is fulfilled, he said. The Coven is dissolved. The city is reclaimed. He turned me to face him, his red eyes bored into mine, burning with a dangerous intensity. Now, he said softly, we discuss the price. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Vincenzo installed me in the master suite, Rodrigo's old room. It was ironic in a sick way. I used to change the sheets on this massive four-poster bed. Now I was lying in it, staring at the canopy, listening to the silence of the empty mansion. I was safe. I was alive. I had won. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? My chest ached. A dull, throbbing pain right behind my sternum, like a bruise that wouldn't heal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vincenzo's face. I heard his voice. I felt the phantom pressure of his hand on my wrist. I got up and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, oblivious to the massacre that had just happened on the hill. It hurts, doesn't it? I spun around. Vincenzo was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace. I hadn't heard him enter. I hadn't even sensed him. He was clean now, dressed in a fresh suit of charcoal grey. He held a glass of dark red liquid, swirling it lazily. What hurts? I asked, clutching my robe tighter. The tether, he said. He tapped his own chest. The marriage of bone isn't just words, Allyssa. It is a biological imperative. You bound yourself to a vampire. You invited my essence into your soul. He stood up and walked toward me. The ache in my chest flared hot, then eased as he got closer. Proximity. The pain was withdrawal. Oh God, I whispered. I'm addicted to you. Not yet, he corrected. Right now, you are merely acclimated. The addiction comes later. He stopped a foot away. He looked tired. The ancient boredom was back in his eyes, but beneath it there was something else. Curiosity, hunger. You are a strange creature, he said. You killed Rodrigo without hesitation, yet you tremble when I look at you. You're scarier than Rodrigo, I said. I am, he agreed, but I am also yours for now. He reached out and touched my cheek. The cold of his skin felt soothing against the feverish heat of the bond. The sun rises in an hour, he said. You should sleep. The transition is exhausting for mortals. Transition? I asked sharply. I'm not turning. I didn't ask to be turned. No, he said. You asked for protection. You asked to be my consort. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. But the law has fine print too, little rat. A human cannot hold the title of consort to the first king. It is biologically impossible. You would burn up from the proximity. He pulled back, smiling that terrible, beautiful smile. You have 7 days, he said. 7 days to prepare. And then? And then what? And then, he said, I make you worthy of the title. He turned and walked to the door. Sleep well, consort. Tomorrow we hold court. The other covens will come to see the human who leashed a king. Try not to look too delicious. The next morning the mansion was full. Not with the coven, they were dust in the vacuum cleaners, but with others, strangers, vampires I didn't recognize. They moved through the halls with predatory grace, eyeing the bloodstains on the walls with amusement rather than horror. Vultures, Vincenzo explained as he led me down the stairs. Scavengers. They heard the red spire fell. They have come to see if there are scraps to pick over. He had dressed me in a gown of midnight blue velvet, heavy and stiff. It covered me from neck to wrist, hiding my bruises, hiding my humanity. Around my neck hung a heavy silver collar studded with obsidian, a mark of ownership. Do not speak, Vincenzo instructed. Do not look them in the eye. You are the consort, but you are still prey. If they sense weakness, they will tear you apart before I can stop them. I thought I had immunity, I hissed. You have my immunity, he said. That protects you from murder. It does not protect you from politics. We entered the grand hall. It had been cleaned. My old cleaning crew had been busy, but the smell of death still lingered under the scent of lilies. 50 vampires turned to look at us. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were the lords and ladies of the neighboring territories, the rivals Rodrigo had feared. Vincenzo, a tall woman with hair like spun gold purred, stepping forward. We thought you were a myth, a bedtime story. I was sleeping, Genevieve, Vincenzo said smoothly. The red spire was loud. I woke up to silence them. And this. Genevieve looked at me. Her eyes were green, but they had vertical pupils like a cat. You kept a pet. How quaint. Not a pet, Vincenzo said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming a rumble that vibrated the floorboards. My consort. Silence. Genevieve's smile faltered. Consort, a human. Vincenzo, surely the sleep has addled your wits. The law forbids. The law, Vincenzo interrupted, binds me. She invoked the marriage of bone. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They looked at me with new eyes, not as food but as a curiosity, a dangerous anomaly. She must be clever, a man in a red suit drawled, to trap the first king. She is adequate, Vincenzo said, sounding bored. He squeezed my waist, his fingers digging into the velvet. It was a warning, play along. But can she hold the position? Genevieve asked, circling us. The marriage of bone demands strength. A human body is fragile. She reached out, her nails lengthening into claws reaching for my face. Vincenzo didn't move. He let her get close. I didn't flinch. I remembered the fight with Rodrigo. I remembered the power I felt holding the sword. Touch me, I said, my voice ringing clear in the silence, and the king will add your heart to the collection on the floor. Genevieve froze. Her claw hovered an inch from my eye. She looked at Vincenzo. He was smiling. It was a proud, vicious smile. She speaks the truth, Vincenzo said. She is under my protection, and she has a temper. Genevieve pulled her hand back. She looked at me with something like respect, or maybe just caution. Very well, she said. We acknowledge the claim. She bowed. It was a shallow, mocking bow, but it was a bow. The others followed suit. We had survived the first test. But as I looked around the room at the hungry eyes and the sharp smiles, I realized the truth. I wasn't safe. I had just traded one pit for a bigger, shinier one, and my 7 days were ticking down. The Coven is gone, but the sharks are circling. If you're enjoying Alyssa's high-stakes game of survival, don't forget to like this video. It tells the algorithm you want to see, if she survives the week. By the 3rd day, the food stopped tasting like food. I tried to eat the breakfast Vincenzo's new staff had prepared, eggs, toast, fruit, but it tasted like ash. It sat heavy in my stomach, alien and wrong. The only thing that smelled good was him. Vincenzo walked into the dining room, buttoning his cuffs. He stopped when he saw me pushing the eggs around my plate. The rejection begins, he noted, taking the seat at the head of the table. I'm not hungry, I lied. You are starving, he corrected, just not for that. He leaned forward. The scent hit me, rain, old books, and underneath it, the rich copper tang of the blood that ran through his veins. My mouth watered. I felt a sharp cramp in my stomach, a hunger so violent it made my vision swim. This is part of the deal. I rasped, gripping the edge of the table. The marriage of bone merges our essences, he said, pouring himself coffee he wouldn't drink. Your body is realizing it is incompatible with your soul. Your soul belongs to a vampire. Your body is still human. It is confusing for your metabolism. So I starved to death in 4 days. Oh, he said, you accept the inevitable. He stood up and walked to my chair. He tilted my head back, exposing my neck. His fingers were cold, but they burned. I could feed you, he whispered. A drop of my blood would sustain you for a week. It would stop the pain. And speed up the transition, I asked. Yes. I pulled away. No, I have 4 days. I'm staying human as long as I can. Vincenzo sighed, straightening up. Stubborn. It is an admirable quality in a general, but a tedious one in a wife. I'm not your wife yet, I snapped. Legally, you are. Biologically, he looked me up and down. Biologically, you are a ticking bomb. The doors opened. A servant, a thrall, eyes glazed, bowed low. My king, a visitor, Lord Raphael of the Western Reach. Vincenzo's expression hardened. Send him away. I am not receiving. He says, the servant hesitated. He says he has come to challenge the validity of the compact. Vincenzo went still. The temperature in the room plummeted. The windows frosted over in seconds. Interesting, he said softly. He looked at me. It seems Genevieve has been talking. Someone thinks they have found a loophole in your loophole. Lord Raphael looked less like a vampire and more like a corporate lawyer who ate babies. He sat in the library, impeccable in a navy suit, holding a leather-bound folio. He didn't look at Vincenzo. He looked at me. The human, he said. Does she speak? She speaks when she has something intelligent to say, Vincenzo said, sitting in the high-backed chair opposite him. Unlike some. Raphael smiled thinly. I'll get to the point. The marriage of bone requires the petitioner to be a maiden of the realm. Allyssa here, he gestured to me with a dismissive hand. She is not of the realm. She is a transient, a drifter, no birth records in the city, no lineage. He slammed the folio shut. She is a stray. Strays have no standing. The compact is void. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was right. I wasn't from here. I'd run away from a foster home 3 cities over before Rodrigo's people snatched me. If the compact is void, Raphael continued, his voice silky, then she is not a consort. She is poaching on Coven territory, and the punishment for poaching is death, Vincenzo finished. He didn't look worried. He looked bored, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. Raphael was powerful. He had an army waiting outside the city limits. If Vincenzo fought him, it would be a war, and Vincenzo was still weak from his long sleep. I invoke the guest right, I said. Both vampires turned to look at me. Excuse me, Raphael asked. I'm not a poacher, I said, stepping forward. The hunger cramp hit me again, but I shoved it down. I lived in this house for 5 years. I cleaned these floors. I dusted these books. I served the Coven. I pointed to the folio in Raphael's hand. Check the labor logs. Rodrigo was meticulous about records. My name is on the peril. I wasn't a stray. I was an employee. Raphael frowned. He opened the folio. And under the sanguine labor laws of 1894, I continued, my voice gaining strength, a servant who resides in a vampire household for more than a year is considered of the house. I am not a transient. I am a resident. I leaned over the table, looking the ancient vampire in the eye. I am of the realm by service, Lord Raphael. My claim stands. Raphael stared at the ledger. He stared at me. He looked at Vincenzo, who was hiding a smile behind his hand. She is correct, Vincenzo said. Section 7, service equals citizenship. Raphael closed the book slowly. He stood up. The air crackled with tension. For a second, I thought he was going to attack. Very clever, Raphael murmured, for a human. He bowed to Vincenzo. The challenge is withdrawn, but be warned, King, the blood moon has passed. Her immunity now rests solely on your strength, and you look tired. He turned and left. As soon as the door closed, Vincenzo let out a breath he'd been holding. He slumped in the chair, his skin turning grayer. Are you okay? I asked, moving toward him. He is right, Vincenzo whispered. I am weak. The awakening, destroying the Coven, it took too much. I need to feed. He looked at me. The hunger in his eyes wasn't predatory anymore. It was desperate. I need blood, Allyssa. Real blood, not the swill from the cellar. I froze. You want to bite me? No, he groaned, closing his eyes. If I bite you now, I will kill you. The bond I won't be able to stop. He gripped the arms of the chair so hard the wood splintered. Go, he rasped. Leave the room. Lock the door. If I smell you for one more second, I will tear your throat out. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. I pushed the dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed, my heart racing, listening to the sounds of Vincenzo destroying the library downstairs. He was starving, and because of the bond, I could feel it. I felt his hollowness. I felt the burning ache in his veins. He was dying. If he didn't feed on powerful blood soon, he would wither. And if he withered, Raphael would come back. And he wouldn't bring a lawyer this time. I looked at my arm. Pale skin. Blue veins. I was the consort. I was the one who had demanded this. I had demanded he be my weapon. You have to maintain your weapons. I stood up. I walked to the door. I pushed the dresser aside. I walked down the stairs. The library was a wreck. Books were torn apart. Furniture was smashed. Vincenzo was huddled in the corner, shaking. "I told you to leave," he snarled, not looking up. "You need blood," I said, "not yours." "There's no one else here, Vincenzo." I walked over to him. I knelt in front of him. I pulled the collar of my dress down, exposing my neck. "Drink," I said. He looked up. His eyes were black pools. The red glow was gone, replaced by a void of pure need. "If I start," he whispered, "I might not stop." "Then I'll stop you," I said, "or the bond will." I reached out and took his hand. I placed it on my waist. "Do it. That's an order, King." He let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He surged forward. His fangs pierced my skin. It didn't hurt. That was the surprise. It felt electric. A jolt of cold fire that shot down my spine and curled my toes. I gasped, clutching his shoulders. I could feel the blood leaving me, the life force draining away. But I also felt him. I felt his gratitude, his relief, his power returning, flooding into him like a tide. And then I felt the shift. The moment where the hunger took over. The moment where he stopped being Vincenzo and became the beast. He growled against my throat, his grip tightening, his drinking becoming frantic, violent. My vision blurred. Cold crept into my limbs. "He's killing me," I thought. "He's actually doing it." "Vincenzo," I whispered. He didn't stop. "Vincenzo," I screamed, pushing at his chest. Nothing. He was lost in the blood. I was fading. The darkness was closing in. I had saved him, and now he was going to consume me. Then the ring on his finger, the heavy gold signet of the king, burned against my skin. The law, the contract, protection. He froze. With a wrenching gasp, he tore himself away from me. He threw himself backward, crashing into the bookshelf, chest heaving, mouth stained crimson. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching my neck. The room spun. Vincenzo stared at me, horror dawning in his eyes. He wiped his mouth, looking at the blood on his hand. My blood. "I almost," he choked out. "But you didn't," I whispered. He scrambled over to me. He bit his own wrist and pressed it to my mouth. "Drink," he commanded. "Heal." I drank. His blood was thick, metallic, and hot. It seared my throat. The wound on my neck closed instantly. The strength rushed back into my limbs, but something else happened too. The ache in my chest, the bond snapped into focus. It wasn't a bruise anymore. It was a chain, a golden, burning chain connecting my heart to his. I looked at him. He looked at me. His eyes weren't black anymore. They were gold. "You fed me," he whispered, touching the healing skin of my neck. "You saved me." "I invested in my asset," I said, though my voice was shaky. He laughed, a soft, breathless sound. He leaned his forehead against mine. "You are terrifying, Allyssa." "I know." We sat there in the ruins of the library, covered in each other's blood, breathing the same air. The 7 days weren't up, but the transition had already begun. I could feel his heartbeat. And for the first time, it was beating in sync with mine. The 7th day dawned with a silence that felt heavy enough to crush bone. I woke up cold. Not the chill of a drafty room, but a deep, pervasive cold that started in my marrow and worked its way out. My fingers were stiff. My heartbeat was sluggish, a slow, heavy drum in my ears. Thump, thump, thump. I rolled over. Vincenzo was watching me. He wasn't in bed. He was standing by the balcony doors, shrouded in shadow. He looked grim. "It is time," he said. "The 7 days," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, hollow. "Is it over?" "The grace period is over," he said. He walked toward the bed. He looked like he was walking to a funeral. "Your body has held on as long as it can. The bond is demanding its due." He sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out and took my hand. His skin, usually so cold to me, felt warm. That was bad. That meant my temperature was dropping below his. "You have a choice," he said. "Do I?" "You can dissolve the marriage," he said. The words seemed to cost him physical pain to speak. "You can release me from the request. The bond will break. You will return to being human. You will leave this house, and you will never see me again." "And Raphael?" I asked. "The other covens?" "I will hold them off," he promised. "I will buy you time to run. You can have a life, Allyssa, a mortal life. Sunsets, children, aging." He squeezed my hand. Or, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, you stay. You let the transition complete. You die, Allyssa, and you wake up as something else. I looked at him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was giving me an out. He was offering to fight a war alone just to give me a chance at being normal. I thought about the normal life I'd had before, the scrubbing, the fear, the invisibility. I thought about the last 7 days, the terror, yes, but also the power, the respect, the feeling of being seen, truly seen, by a creature who had watched empires rise and fall. I don't want to be normal, I said. Vincenzo closed his eyes. You don't know what you are asking. The hunger, the cold, the eternity. It is a burden. It's a life, I said, and it's our life. I sat up. The room spun, but I gritted my teeth. I'm not breaking the contract, Vincenzo. I signed on for the full package. Consort, partner, vampire. He opened his eyes. They were burning gold. Then we must be quick, he said. Your heart is failing. He stood and pulled me up. My legs gave way immediately. He caught me, lifting me into his arms like I weighed nothing. He carried me down to the pit. It felt fitting. This was where it started. This was where it would end. The pit was different now. He had cleaned it. There were candles, hundreds of them, flickering in the dark. In the center of the stone floor, there was a shallow basin carved into the rock. It was filled with water that glowed faintly silver. The font of origins, he explained, laying me gently on the edge of the basin. The old way, the royal way. He knelt beside me. He unbuttoned his cuff and rolled up his sleeve. This will not be like the feeding in the library, he warned. That was sustenance. This is reconstruction. It will hurt. I can handle it, I said. I know you can. He smiled, a sad, proud smile. You are the strongest creature I have met in 5 centuries. He took a silver dagger from his belt. He drew it across his wrist. Dark, thick blood welled up. Drink, he said. Drink until your heart stops. And then, wait for me. I took his wrist. I drank. It wasn't like before. It wasn't electric. It was heavy. It tasted of iron and earth and time. It tasted like swallowing a mountain. I drank, and the cold in my limbs intensified. The darkness at the edge of my vision grew. My heart. Thump, thump, silence. The pain hit me a second later. It was a wave of fire that started in my stomach and exploded outward. I screamed, but no sound came out. My lungs weren't working. I was dying. I was dead. I am here, Vincenzo's voice whispered in the dark. I am here. Hold on to me. I felt his hand on my forehead. I felt the bond, that golden chain, pulling tight, anchoring me to the world. Then the darkness swallowed me whole. The awakening. I didn't wake up. I ignited. My eyes snapped open. The world was loud. I could hear the drip of water 3 rooms away. I could hear the scuttle of a spider in the walls. I could hear the wind outside singing against the stone. I sat up. The pain was gone. The cold was gone. I felt limitless. I looked at my hands. They were pale, luminous in the candlelight. I could see the texture of the stone floor in microscopic detail. Allyssa. Vincenzo was standing over me. He looked anxious. I stood up. It was effortless. I felt light, fast, dangerous. I looked at him, really looked at him. I could see the pulse in his neck. I could smell the ancient dust on his coat. I could hear the blood moving in his veins. It smelled intoxicating. Vincenzo, I said. My voice was different. It was deeper, smoother. It sounded like music. Are you? He asked. I smiled. I felt my fangs extend, sharp and new against my lip. I'm me, I said. Just more. He let out a breath of relief. He reached for me. Crash. The sound came from above, from the grand hall, the sound of doors being breached, the sound of heavy boots, the sound of steel. Vincenzo spun around, his expression hardening. Hunters, he hissed. Raphael didn't come alone. He brought the church. The church, I asked. The vampire hunters, they track the energy of a turning. A royal turning sets off alarms for miles. He looked at me. You are a newborn. You are weak. You must hide. Hide, I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. I looked at the stone walls. I could feel the vibrations of the men upstairs. I could smell their fear. I could smell their blood. I wasn't weak. I was starving. And I was the consort of the king. I'm not hiding, I said. I walked to the weapon rack on the wall of the pit, Vincenzo's personal collection, and picked up a long, silver sword. It felt like a feather in my hand. "You said you wanted to clean house, Vincenzo," I said, turning to him, my gold eyes locked with his. "Let's finish the job." Vincenzo looked at me. He looked at the sword. He looked at the monster he had created. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. "After you, my queen." We walked toward the stairs, toward the screams, toward the war. The Coven was dead. The king was awake. And the new queen was hungry. If you want to see Allyssa and Vincenzo tear through the vampire hunters in episode 2, make sure you're subscribed. The transformation is complete, but the reign of blood is just beginning.